On a bright afternoon in New York City. The sidewalks were bustling with people, businessmen rushing to meetings, tourists snapping photos, and street performers entertaining small crowds. Amid the chaos, a homeless man sat quietly on the corner of a busy avenue, his belongings packed into a tattered backpack beside him. His face, weathered by years of hardship, remained expressionless as countless people passed him by, barely sparing him a glance. Then, something unusual happened. A tall figure, unmistakable with his golden hair and signature suit, stepped toward the man. It was none other than Donald Trump. People nearby did double takes, some pausing mid-stride to see if their eyes were deceiving them. What was Trump doing here? And why was he approaching a homeless man? Without hesitation, Trump reached into his pocket. But instead of pulling out his wallet, he did something that stunned everyone. He looked the homeless man in the eyes and asked, "Can you spare $1?" For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The homeless man blinked in confusion. Bystanders exchanged bewildered glances. Was this some kind of joke? A test? A publicity stunt? No one knew what to expect. And then, something truly shocking happened. The homeless man squinted up at Trump, his expression a mix of confusion and disbelief. He let out a dry chuckle, shaking his head as if he hadn't heard correctly. "You're asking me for $1?" he asked, his voice hoarse from the rough city air. Trump nodded, his face unreadable. "Yeah. Just $1." By now, a small crowd had started to gather. Some whispered among themselves. Others pulled out their phones to record the bizarre encounter. A billionaire, one of the richest men in the world, was standing on the street, asking a homeless man for money. It didn't make sense. The homeless man studied Trump for a moment, then reached into the pocket of his ragged coat. Slowly, he pulled out a crumpled dollar bill, the edges worn and dirty. He held it between his fingers, hesitating. "You really need this?" he asked skeptically.
Trump shrugged. "I just want to see if you'd give it."
A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some people frowned. Others chuckled. But the homeless man simply stared at the bill in his hand. His fingers twitched slightly, as if debating whether to hand it over or not. "Why?" he finally asked, his voice quiet but firm. Trump smirked, tilting his head. "Maybe I just want to know what a man does when he has almost nothing left to give." The homeless man exhaled slowly. His eyes, tired but sharp, searched Trump's face for answers. Was this a trick? A lesson? A setup?
The crowd waited, holding their breath. The homeless man held out the dollar, offering it to Trump with a steady hand.
Trump looked at the crumpled dollar bill. But instead of taking it, he simply stared at the man holding it. The silence in the air grew heavier, the crowd now fully invested in the strange encounter. Some people whispered. Others lifted their phones higher to get a better shot. The homeless man let out a small chuckle, shaking the dollar slightly. "Go on. Take it," he said, his voice rough but steady. "You asked for it, didn't you?" Trump narrowed his eyes, as if assessing the man in front of him. Then, with an unexpected softness in his voice, he asked, "Why did you give it to me?"
The homeless man shrugged. "Because you asked. And if someone asks for help, I try to give it. Even if it's just $1.
Trump folded his arms, still not reaching for the bill. "Even though you don't have much yourself?" The man smirked. Maybe I don't have much money. But I've got enough to help someone who needs it. Even if that someone is you. The crowd gasped quietly. Some people smiled. Others whispered things like, "That's deep." Or "Wow. Didn't expect that." For the first time, Trump seemed to hesitate. His expression shifted. No longer amused. No longer testing. There was something thoughtful in his eyes. Something distant. He reached into his suit pocket. And the crowd leaned in, expecting him to pull out his wallet. But instead, he pulled out something else, something that made the homeless man's brow furrow in confusion. A single gold coin. Trump held it up between his fingers, letting the sunlight glint off its smooth surface. "Do you know what this is?" he asked. The homeless man shook his head slowly. "Looks like money," he said. Trump smirked. "It is. But it's worth a lot more than $1. He reached forward, placing the coin in the homeless man's palm, pressing it down gently before closing the man's fingers around it. "Consider it an investment," Trump said, his voice lower now, more serious. The homeless man opened his hand, staring at the coin resting in his rough palm. He turned it over, rubbing his thumb across its surface. The weight of it felt real, solid. But he didn't understand. "Why are you giving me this?" he asked. Trump simply smiled. "Because you gave me something first."
The crowd erupted into murmurs. People shifting excitedly. Some clapped. Others exchanged odd glances.
The homeless man, still holding the coin, looked up at Trump with an expression no one could quite read. "And what am I supposed to do with this?" he asked.
Trump's smile widened. "That's up to you."
And then, before anyone could say another word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd as if he had never been there. The homeless man stared after him, the coin growing warm in his hand. People around him buzzed with excitement. Theories already forming. Some called out, asking him what he was going to do next. But he wasn't sure. Not yet.
And as he sat there, staring at the golden coin glinting in the daylight, he realized one thing: this wasn't just money. It was a choice.
The homeless man sat there for a while, his mind racing. The weight of the gold coin in his palm felt heavier now. Not just from its material value, but from the significance of what had just happened. People continued to approach him, asking what had just occurred, offering their own theories. Some believed it was a publicity stunt. Others thought it was a test of some sort. But he didn't care about their opinions.
He couldn't shake the question Trump had asked, "Why did you give it to me?" The simplicity of the question stayed with him, gnawing at his thoughts. He had simply given the $1 because it was the right thing to do. It wasn't about how much he had or didn't have, it was about kindness. About sharing what little he could.
And yet, here he was, holding a coin that could change his life. As the afternoon wore on, more people stopped by, their curiosity piqued by the scene. A few asked him if they could see the coin, marveling at its gold gleam. But the homeless man refused, clutching it tightly to his chest. He wasn't sure what to do with it yet. But he knew one thing: it wasn't just a token from a rich man. It felt like a challenge. A reminder that the world was still full of surprises. That people could still act out of kindness. And that maybe, just maybe, he had a part to play in something bigger. As night began to fall, the city lights blinked on, casting a soft glow over the streets. He stood up, his legs stiff from sitting too long. The weight of the coin was now a constant presence in his pocket. A reminder of the encounter. He started walking, unsure of where to go or what to do next. His usual routine was to find a safe corner to sleep for the night. But now there was something else on his mind. He felt different. A small ember of hope had been lit inside him. The homeless man walked to a nearby park, sat on a bench, and took the coin out again, turning it over in his hands. It gleamed in the dim light, its surface flawless. He thought about the question Trump had posed. What if he did something different? What if this coin was a chance to change the direction of his life? Just as he was lost in thought, a woman with a young child walked by. The child, no older than 5, looked up at him curiously. She stopped for a moment, her eyes fixed on the coin.
Is that a magic coin? The child asked innocently. The homeless man chuckled softly. I don't know, sweetheart. It might just be. He smiled. A small but genuine smile. And tucked the coin back into his pocket.
As he watched the child and her mother disappear into the crowd, something clicked. Maybe the coin wasn't about wealth. Maybe it wasn't about what it could buy. It was about the magic of possibility, the chance to change, to take action, to turn things around. Perhaps he wasn't meant to keep the coin forever. Perhaps it was meant to be passed on, to spread the kindness he had received. The idea grew within him, filling him with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The next morning, he would do something he hadn't done in a long time. He would find a way to help someone else. It didn't matter if it was small, like giving $1, or something bigger. What mattered was that he had been given a chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. The story wasn't over. It was just beginning. The following morning, the sun rose slowly over the horizon, casting a soft glow over the streets of New York City. The homeless man, now determined with a renewed sense of purpose, walked through the busy city, his thoughts racing. He had decided that he wasn't going to waste this second chance. He wasn't sure exactly how he would do it. But he knew that his life had to change, and maybe this coin, this strange gift from Donald Trump, was the catalyst. As he walked past the towering skyscrapers and bustling crowds, he felt the eyes of strangers on him. But this time, he didn't mind. He felt a new sense of pride in his stride. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. He passed by a soup kitchen where volunteers were handing out meals to those in need. A woman standing outside, holding a bag of food, glanced at him and offered him a polite nod. The homeless man approached her slowly, and she smiled at him, her eyes kind but cautious. "Can I help you?" she asked. The homeless man took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the gold coin in his pocket. "I was wondering, do you know anyone who could use some help? I mean, more than just food. Something different."
The woman raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the question. What kind of help are you talking about?
He paused, staring at the coin once again before looking her in the eyes. "I want to give something away. Not for me. For someone else. Someone who might need it more than I do." The woman looked at him carefully. "That's very kind of you. But why? What changed?" The homeless man smiled, the warmth of his own realization settling in. "I've learned that sometimes we don't need more for ourselves, we just need to share what we've got. And maybe that makes all the difference."
With a slight nod, the woman motioned toward a man sitting alone on a nearby bench. His clothes ragged, his eyes dull. "Him. He's been here a while." I'm sure he could use something more than just food.
The homeless man nodded silently and walked over to the bench. His footsteps measured but sure. The man on the bench looked up as he approached. And there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes, a recognition of hardship. Of struggle.
"Hey," the homeless man began gently. "I've been where you are. And I just wanted to give you something."
The man eyed him suspiciously. "What do you want?"
Nothing, the homeless man said softly. I just want you to have this. He pulled the coin from his pocket and placed it into the man's hand.
The stranger blinked at it. Then looked back up. Confused. "What is this?" "It's a chance." "A second chance," the homeless man said. "It's up to you what you do with it. But I hope it gives you what you need to start over." The man stared at the coin. Then at the homeless man. His expression unreadable. For a long moment. He didn't say a word. Finally. He nodded slowly. As if understanding something that had eluded him for a long time. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," the homeless man replied with a smile. "Just take it. Use it to change your life." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving the stranger holding the coin in silence. The feeling of having given something meaningful settled in the homeless man's chest. A warmth he hadn't felt before. He didn't know if his small gesture would change the other man's life. But he did know one thing, it had already changed his own. As he walked down the busy street, he couldn't help but wonder, was this the right thing to do? But deep down, he knew it was. And what happened next would surprise even him. Days passed. And the homeless man, now full of purpose, continued his journey through the streets. He spent his days talking to those who had fallen on hard times, trying to find ways to help. Even if it was just by sharing a warm meal or offering a word of encouragement. The coin was still with him, tucked into his pocket as a constant reminder of that strange encounter with Trump. But it no longer felt like something heavy weighing him down. Instead, it felt like a tool, something to pass on when the time was right. Then, one afternoon, as he sat on the same park bench where he had first met the man he had given the coin to, he saw something unexpected. The man, the one he had handed the coin to, approached him again. But this time, his appearance had changed. He looked cleaner. His clothes a little newer. His eyes brighter. He walked with purpose. No longer slouched or defeated. "Hey," the man greeted. His voice warm. "You probably don't remember me. But I'm the one you gave the coin to." The homeless man's heart skipped a beat. He stood up, looking at the man in disbelief. You actually used it?"
The man smiled, holding up the gold coin in his hand. "I did. It wasn't easy. But it got me thinking. I started small, found a job. Got back on my feet. That coin, it didn't just change my life. It made me believe I could start over."
Tears welled up in the homeless man's eyes as he realized the weight of what had just happened. The coin had worked. The change he had hoped for. The one that he had given in the hope of passing on something good, had actually come to fruition. He hadn't just changed the man's life, he had started a ripple effect. I can't believe it," he said, his voice shaking. "I thought it was just a gesture. I didn't know it would do all that." The man shook his head. "It wasn't just the coin. It was what you did. You gave me something when you had nothing left to give. You reminded me that it's not just about surviving, it's about living." The two men stood there for a moment. The noise of the city fading into the background as they shared an understanding that went beyond words.
And then, In a quiet voice, the homeless man said, "I think I'm ready now. I'm going to do what you did, give. Help others. Maybe it'll work for them, too."
The man nodded. His eyes filled with gratitude. "I'll help you. We can do this together." The homeless man smiled. The weight of the gold coin in his pocket now lighter than ever. He had started something. Something bigger than himself. And for the first time in a long while, he felt like he had purpose. It wasn't about the gold coin anymore, it was about the impact of his actions, the kindness, the hope, and the belief that anyone, no matter how broken, could rebuild. The two of them walked off together. A small yet powerful alliance formed by an unexpected act of kindness. They didn't know what the future held, but they were ready to face it.
And as they disappeared into the busy streets of New York, the homeless man smiled to himself, knowing that the journey had only just begun.
What happened next was the start of something extraordinary.